A recurring question in the webinars that I give like 3-4 times a week to the biggest companies is, okay, do you need a wrist rest for the keyboard or not? And the answer as often is it depends. I'd like to highlight the details of it depends so that you can take decision regarding your situation. Look, the thing is, a wrist rest is a misleading name, because if your wrist rests on the thing, which I have here, the effect will be that. Yeah, if your wrists rest, well, all that part doesn't move, and therefore your wrists move sideways. The problem with this is that, if you look at the architecture of the arm, the elbow is meant to move your hand in the horizontal plane, whilst the wrist is meant to move your hand in the vertical plane. So you see, both have complementary functions, say. If I have anything here which is a fixed point, the elbow does not move anymore, and therefore the wrist has to move the hand in the two directions. The problem is that this direction, which is called ulnar radial deviation, is not physiological and increases the risk of tendinitis. Okay? Therefore, a wrist rest should only be used if it's to float on it, not to rest on it. So if you use the wrist rest, condition number 1 has to be that you preserve the mobility of the elbow. Condition number 2 now. You see that I have 3 keyboards here near me. There's a reason for that. It's to show you that if the keyboard is quite thick, as this old, I think it's a cherry keyboard, well, that's okay, I can float on it. If now my keyboard is very thin, as this Logitech K380, with a big old-fashioned wrist rest like this one, my wrists will be descending like this, and this increases pressure in the carpal tunnel. Most people think that only extension increases pressure in the carpal tunnel, but actually not, also flexion. So you don't want to have a wrist rest which is thicker than the keyboard, which is the reason why Logitech has developed a very thin wrist rest. Now, when I use this keyboard, to be very honest with you, I don't use a keyboard wrist rest because my wrists are like a centimeter above the desk and I keep them there. Obviously, if you have a keyboard like this one, which is the new Logitech K860, well, you have a wrist rest, but obviously the rule is the same, is you have to glide on it and float on it. So conclusion, do you need a wrist rest or not? Well, it depends on your tendency. If you are able to master this movement and keep your wrists and your carpal tunnels above the desk surface so as to avoid wrist extension and pressure from the desk on the carpal tunnel, well, if you can do that, you don't need a wrist rest. If you do not manage to do this out of a habit, well, then the wrist rest will help you keep the wrists straight, but still you have to be careful that you don't, say, create a fixed point. So you see, the wrist rest will be part of the answer, but not the whole answer. And in every case, you have to take a wrist rest which is not thicker than your keyboard.